Happy Wednesday, my dear listeners of the Female Guys Requested podcast. This is your host, Ting Ting from Las Vegas. In today's episode, I'm excited to catch up with my good friend, Brigitte Denton. We met at a National Outdoor Leadership School Instructor course back in 2008, and I can't believe it has been almost 17 years. Brigitte has lived in the Eastern Sierra since 2007. Moving from Southern California, where she grew up with the ocean on one side and the mountains on the other. She has a Bachelor of Science degree and teaching credential in biological sciences. Before moving to the Sierra, she spent 18 years as a Los Angeles County Fire Department Ocean Lifeguard and EMT, protecting the lives of beachgoers. She also spent 7 years teaching middle school integrated science. In 2003, she became a Wilderness EMT and later left traditional K-12 teaching to pursue outdoor education. Since 2007, Brigitte has guided and instructed courses in mountaineering, backpacking, and sea kayaking, exploring areas of Alaska, the continental U.S., and Europe. These days, Brigitte works for Mono County EMS as an advanced EMT. She also runs her own business, Beyond Limits Education, teaching a variety of medical courses and providing education consulting and instructional design services. Brigitte is an outstanding educator and passionate about helping other people. She is tough and also has a very soft heart. In this episode, we dive deep into various topics related to education. She shares the twists and turns of her life, from school teacher to outdoor education and then to EMS. When I asked about how she dealt with burnout and depression, she opened up and shared her struggle and a slow recovery after a near-death accident. Fascinating stories. Now, please enjoy this wonderful episode with Brigitte Denton. Welcome to the Female Guys Requested podcast. I'm so happy to have you, and thank you for doing a warfare research with me back in October. And then that was a light bulb moment for me. I just said, ooh, how come I didn't think of Brigitte? I should have interviewed her. Yeah. So, of course, I know you for quite many years now. But for our audience, do you mind just give us a pretty brief intro about yourself?
Okay. Well, first, Ting Ting and I met we took a NOLS instructor training course together in 2008, I believe.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. So that's where we met. So we've known each other for quite a long time now. A little bit about myself. I live in the Eastern Sierra in Mammoth Lakes, California. I've been up here since 2007. I'm originally from Southern California, the LA area. I grew up on the west side of Los Angeles as basically a beach kid. And so grew up by the ocean and had the Santa Monica Mountains in my backyard as well. So that's kind of where my stomping ground started, and my joy just for being outside in general came from. And so I was either in the ocean, dirt bagging in the sand, or hiking in the mountains. And so that's pretty much in a nutshell. I can go on to talk about my professional career and the different twists and turns that it's taken, but I think that's the whole point of this podcast. So
that's correct. Yeah. So just briefly, how many years did you actively guide. I know that you work for NOS for quite a few
Mm-hmm.
years, and then you also work in Alaska for, I don't know which company that you work for.
Above and Beyond Alaska.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I've worked for Sierra Mountain Guides. I've worked for Adventures Cross Country. But I would say that my initial, and I guess you could call it guiding, but I started my education career teaching middle school science. And we had a component as part of the science program, the Santa Monica Science Magnet, where we would take students on day trips in the Santa Monica Mountains. And then we'd also take them on overnight trips in conjunction with, for example, we take our 7th graders to Yosemite, and we would spend a week in Yosemite with Yosemite Institute. And so, but it was those trips that really sparked that desire to teach outside. So, I spent 7 years in the classroom teaching in Santa Monica at John Adams Middle School. And then after that, my first job in outdoor education was with and guiding was with Adventures Cross Country. So I spent a summer working for them. And then the following summer, or spring, I should say, we took our NOLS instructor course together. And I didn't do any courses that summer because I needed to basically pad my bank account again because I had spent all this money on that course. And so another aspect of my life back then was that I was working on the beach as an ocean lifeguard. And so I went back and worked that summer as an ocean lifeguard, where I made a lot more money than I do in outdoor education and guiding. And so was able to recoup. And then the following year, then I started working for both Above and Beyond Alaska. I'm based out of Juneau, and for NOLS. So, and that was also in Alaska as well. And so basically 2007, I started with Adventures Cross Country. And then 2 years later, I basically started consistently working in outdoor ed and guiding in 2009.
And how many years did that last? Because I know that right now you do a lot of, we just mentioned, I just did a Warfare Reaper with you. So
yeah.
Courses now.
So about 10 years. So 2019 was my last course that I worked for NOLS and did any guiding. When the pandemic hit, I basically took a shift in a different direction. And I was starting to teach wilderness medicine courses in 2019 as well. And so just since then, with the pandemic, I kind of veered in a different direction, and I have yet to return to outdoor ed or guiding, even though I get asked. Sometimes I make an appearance with Above and Beyond Alaska. I'll do a little cameo and maybe guide one day. And so,
okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So you grew up in LA, suburban LA.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Would you call yourself a city kid, even though I don't know, on the surface and all of your experience, you're obviously not a typical city kid, but would you admit that you were a city kid though?
Oh, I admit that I'm a city kid, and there's still definitely now, since I've been now living in a rural area for quite some time now, but there's definitely a big part of me that is still that city kid. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because I'm just very curious. I mean, I grew up in the city myself, Taipei, which is a big city. And I'm always curious about, because a lot of my outdoor friends say, oh, I can never live in a city. And then it seems that a lot of my other outdoor friends who could live in the city, but that's because they grew up in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of wondering that combo. Yeah. How do you feel about that combo?
I often say that I'd have a hard time going back to living in a city. especially when I go down. I still have family in the LA area, and my work brings me down there to teach Wolfer courses at the university campuses, and then just family. And I do find myself getting stressed out when I go down, and I start hitting traffic, and then everything is just so busy. And I walk into, say, Costco, because I often do Costco runs when I'm in an area that has a Costco. And so when I stock up and I just walk in and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can handle all these people right now. So it definitely takes some getting used to, or just re-immersing myself. But the more time I spend living in the Eastern Sierra, I find that the harder it is to be in the city. So especially in the dense parts. So where I grew up in a time in the 80s. And there was just a lot more open spaces for me to run amok in. And like there was oil wells, and I remember riding my bike like around the oil wells, because there's a lot of dirt, and I made all these jumps and whatnot. And now all of that area has homes that are so close together that you could probably look at your next door neighbor and see what they're doing in the bathroom. And so,
okay.
yeah. So I have a harder time with just the population density and how busy things are.
I see. So you really enjoying your life right now in Mammoth Lakes?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So you're not missing
Definitely.
the city life.
No.
Okay. And then you mentioned that you play at the beach. You were a beach kid, and then to be honest, your email still said water kid. Yeah. So you have a long connection with water. Can you describe that?
So growing up by the ocean, that was my playground. And I can't remember learning how to swim. My dad threw me in the pool as an infant, and that's when I started learning how to swim. Yeah. I mean, just threw me and I don't remember learning how to swim. And I spent a lot of time at the beach, and then I was an ocean lifeguard. And so really spent a lot of time at the beach, surfing, boogie boarding as a kid, body surfing, and then got into have been immersed in a lot of different water activities. So ocean related, I started scuba diving at the age of 14. And so I don't do that as much these days. It's been a while, but was doing it quite a bit as a teen, in my 20s and into my 30s. And then I also swam growing up and played water polo in college. It's actually what funded my way through college. And so growing up by the beach is, when I say beach kid, I spent a lot of time in the ocean and playing in the sand, building sand castles and when I say beach, yeah.
Okay. And I understand that water polo is a team sport, that it's kind of hard to make a lifelong career. But then say scuba diving or surfing or other things water related. Actually, I'm not very familiar with that line of work. But how do you feel that from right now you don't, I assume, I don't know, you don't do anything related to water, right? So from the water kid transition to a mountain kid.
It depends on how you frame it. There's a lot of lakes here in the Eastern Sierra. And I do have a paddleboard. I actually have an inflatable paddleboard, and listeners might be thinking a stand-up board, but it's not a stand-up board. It's actually a prone board that you lie down on your belly and you paddle, or you can do it on your knees. And so paddleboarding is actually a big sport as well, ocean related sport. And when I say paddleboarding, again, I don't mean stand up. I mean prone boarding. And so I did in lifeguarding and whatnot, I would participate in beach competitions. And so that was one event. And so I've been able to still participate in water activities, at least during the non-snowy months or non-winter months. And so I am still able to get out on my paddleboard, which has been helpful. And then traveling up to Alaska in the summers, I bring my paddleboard with me. And so my husband's family lives in Juneau. And so there's a lot of water there. So I still get my water time in. And then snow, well, I know it's solid. It's still water, and I snowboard and ski, you know?
So basically you're trying to say that for the old time's sake, you still play in the liquid form of water.
Yes, and I'm still that water kid.
Okay, yeah. So you mentioned that you start some tutoring when you were high school. Is that right?
Not tutoring. So you mean how I got into
education. Yes.
So I started my education career just when I got out of college. And talk about twists and turns in life. I wasn't trying to be a teacher. I was actually looking at graduate school programs in marine sciences.
Oh, so that's water kids science.
Yeah. And I had two interesting pathways I wanted to go with it. I either wanted to study cetaceans or dolphins and whales. It was basically marine mammals. And then I also wanted to study sea slugs. So talk about extremes. So sea slugs are my favorite invertebrate.
Okay.
And so I was like, I want to study marine mammals, but I also want to study sea slugs. But so I had a gap year. So I finished my undergrad program, and during my year off in preparing to take the GREs and apply to schools, I applied to be a substitute teacher. And I got hired full time.
Oh, so as a substitute teacher, there's a so-called full-time substitute teacher?
Yeah, they needed teachers, and they were really short: science, math, and special education teachers.
Okay, so you were not a substitute teacher; you were a full-time teacher.
Yeah, I got a phone call, and they're like, "Oh, are you still interested in this science teaching position at Johns Middle School?" And I called them back, and I was like, "I think you made a mistake." Like, because I applied to be a substitute teacher, and they're like, "Do you have a degree in biological sciences from USC?" And I'm like, "Yes." They're like, "Would you be interested in coming in for an interview anyways?" I'm like, "Okay." And so, yeah, the interview went well. And next thing I knew, I was teaching the following week. And I had I had group of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And so talk about being thrown in the deep end.
Okay, it seems like okay.
Yep.
So originally it's like, okay, I'm prepping for the grad school, so I need some type of job.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Right. Because I needed to live. Right.
Right.
I need to pay rent.
And they didn't want you to work part time; they want you to work full time.
Correct.
All right. So you start working, and then did you after all go to the grad school?
Well, I went in a different direction. I was like, okay, I spent time teaching, and I'm like, I actually kind of like this. This is fun. It's hard. It was definitely hard work.
Right.
I was barely staying above water, especially my first couple years as a teacher. But I decided to take a turn, and I went to grad school for education, and was working full time and at school, or went to school at night to get my teaching credential.
So no slots, no memo,
Nope.
Education.
Yes.
I see. So you must really enjoying the teaching then.
I do. I do.
How did it click?
So when I was working in K-12 with my middle school students, one, just my passion for science and being able to share that with the kids was one. And two, my upbringing had challenges. And so I was able to connect with students that had difficult home situations. And those are the two things that kept driving me in education and kept me sticking around. And so, yeah, and it was also in some ways really led me to burn out of education and K-12 education. And so there's a whole piece with that basically spurred my next adventure in life, which was the outdoor education and guiding realm. And so, yeah.
Right. But then you also have your own so your should I call it business or?
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
business. It's a corporation. But I started Beyond Limits Education in 2013. And so
so that was
yeah.
after in those days. I
Uh-huh.
kind of like confused. So I thought that you had that before in those days.
No, it was so with Knowles about that time. So that was a shift. 2006, I had decided that I needed a change, a life change. So
Because
both
the burnout.
Yep. And it was both personal. I needed personal change and I needed professional change. And so there was a lot of different factors. I was in a different relationship that was pretty toxic. 2006, I actually met my current husband. And I sometimes think or tell people, I'm like, yeah, meeting him. It was the time in my life where I turned my life upside right in some ways. So, and then at the time as well, I had been going to school at night for several years. The work demands working at the school was getting to me. And so, and then I also had, and I tell people I burnt out in education due to the work demands, and it was mainly the adults, parents, administrators, and the kids not so much. Like kids, they're going to misbehave. That's part of it, and you're there to help nurture them. But one of the things that really I think sealed the deal in terms of me deciding to move on was I had a former student who was at the high school, and he was shot and killed. And he was he was such a joy to have in class. Like I would literally put him in the front of the classroom because that kid just always smiled. And he was a terrific baseball player. He was really smart. And he was going to be one of the first people in his family to go to college. And I am sure that he would have gotten a baseball scholarship and an academic scholarship. And I was really disillusioned by that. He was basically walking down the street and standing next to the intended target, and someone came up behind them and fired, and the bullet went right through his heart. And I think he was in ninth or 10th grade at the time. And
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so, and I'm starting to get I'm trying to hold it together right now. And yeah, and then that was a huge blow. And then I had some students in my class that were friends with him and the family, and one of my students had seen it happen. He saw his body, and this was a student that was struggling, but I felt like I had like I kind of call it strings, like when I'm trying to reach students who are at risk. I call it like, I'm like, can I tether them? Can I bring them in? And I had that tether. And after Eddie had passed away, I lost that tether, and I lost that student too. And that student made some different choices and jumped into a gang, and I lost touch with that student and whatnot. And so it was just a series of things, and we're human. And I was like, I think I need a break from this. And so all of those factors led me to moving to the Eastern Sierra and basically kind of starting out fresh. And so when I moved up here, I started tutoring kids. I joined ski school, even though I could barely ski, but they taught me how to ski. And then at that time, I stepped into the outdoor education and guiding world. And that's where we met in 2008 with Knowles. And so, as you know, with outdoor education and guiding, it can be hard to make ends meet. And
Yes.
so I was able to make that work by having multiple jobs. So I worked for Mammoth Mountain. I tutored kids, and then it turned into basically me homeschooling ski racers that were coming up to train. And then that morphed into Beyond Limits education because I needed more help. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. I vaguely remember about this tutoring thing. I just don't remember the timeline. Yeah. So that was when since you have a background in working in education, so tutoring was not something new. And then at that time, that even though you want to dive into outdoor education, but still you need to make ends meet, right? We have to survive. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you were juggling different jobs, including the ski area, right?
Yep, ski area. I mean, people might be able to relate in terms of having multiple jobs. So I basically planned out my year, and I would go work a Knowles course, maybe 2, and then I would go lifeguard for the rest of the summer and into the fall. And then in the wintertime, when the ski area opened, I would teach skiing lessons, sometimes snowboarding lessons, and also be tutoring and homeschooling kids. And I did that throughout the winter. And so I just found, and then Above and Beyond Alaska and Sierra Mountain Guides also comes into the mix, because those are 2 guiding companies that I would also work. And so
it seems like the seasons compete, right? I understand the summer work and then the winter work. Okay, these are different seasons. But you were talking about Alaska, Above and Beyond, and then the Sierra Mountain Guides. Seems like these seasons compete, right?
Yeah, they do. And so that's where Sierra Mountain Guides, they still will ask me to work, and I basically I don't work for them very often. I'm kind of like the cameo guide. I come out of hiding every so often, and hiding is either just basically, when I say hiding, it's being available.
I see.
Yeah.
And during those years, you also have the tutoring. Did you find that there will be a month that you actually couldn't find work?
Yes.
Okay.
And so fall, for example, that was a tougher time. So I typically, starting probably mid-October, like mid-October to mid-December would be pretty light. And so same with the tutoring, because the kids aren't really starting. They start more in December. They get more serious after the holidays and whatnot. And so I wasn't really tutoring even that much during that time period. So I used that time period to go play.
I see. Yeah, that reminds me of my older days. I do also juggle different jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is I bet a lot of newer guys do this. And this is
Mm-hmm.
actually quite hard a problem to solve
It
because a
is.
lot of time you can't secure a contract way ahead, right? So you have
Right.
to wait until I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
long until finally get the contract. And then there will be last minute change and all the things. And then it's not like you can plan way ahead. You kind of
Right.
have to
No.
be roughly planned, but then you have to be very flexible.
Correct. And so to give you an example with Knowles, it made it actually harder for me because I wanted to dive in, but I also needed to feed myself. And um and then half the year when we lived in Mammoth, we did rent a place to stay. The rest of the time, I just lived in my truck. And so, but this year is really harsh, and living in your vehicle during the winter, that can be pretty rough. So Corey and I basically rented a place 6 months out of the year. Um, and and I just remember, for example, with Knowles, like I was trying to get on, I was trying to get more work, but I didn't have enough seniority. I didn't have enough weeks in the field to compete with other people. And so then I would take other work. And then I remember one winter, I told Knowles, I was like, I have this entire winter free. I'm giving it to you. I'm going to make it work. And there was not much work, and that's a financial burden. And I didn't get any work that winter. And I was like, look, you can call me at the last minute and I will go. And I didn't get any work. And so I was like, well, okay, I guess this is just not going to work out. Then the following year, I basically set up work for myself because like I couldn't do that again. And and then I got a phone call from Knowles saying, hey, we really need a mountaineer to go down to Patagonia. And I couldn't go because I was already committed, and I can't, and committed to kids and whatnot. And so I was like, oh, couldn't you have done this the winter before?
Right.
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah,
I found that really frustrating, but it
I
is what it is.
understand. Yeah, I understand. And now, you can like laugh about it, but I bet back then it probably really stressful for you.
Yeah, yeah. And so, um, now I'm in a better financial situation, but back then, not necessarily so, and
Right.
so,
And also back then, I'm curious that yes, you wanted to make ends meet, and then I know that you don't have say luxurious hobbies and everything. You can live very frugally.
mhm.
And then you were a lot younger. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
Okay. And so I wonder whether those are the reason that you're like, okay, I could deal. But then maybe as the days go on, you feel like, hey, I do need a little bit more stability.
I think so. I mean, I definitely, as I've gotten older, um, I was actually just having this conversation, with another friend, and I'm like, am I just getting softer?
Well, I'm getting
So
softer,
I
I
just,
think. Yeah.
and so, um,
We're
and
getting smarter.
yeah, maybe that's it, right? And so, um, Corey and I have property in Mammoth now. We bought a fixer upper in 2013. And I mean, even back then, I was like, because I was moving in and out of storage every 6 months. And so every time we'd have to move, I'd start looking at real estate, and I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm so tired of just having to move my stuff around.
That's
Um,
right.
right. And so in 2013, we started looking. In 2014, we bought our place, which you've been here. Um, and then basically are like setting roots here. And now I have a house. And when I go on trips, I just pack a bag, and that like really helped. Um, and and now I kind of just I'm starting to appreciate sleeping in my own bed and not having to move around so much. and
Yes.
not have to worry about having a roof over my head or what that's going to look like. Am I going to struggle being able to do that? Am I going to have, am I even going to be able to return to the Eastern Sierra, a place that I really love, or what have you? So, yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Because I think I went through all the things. This might be a very common thing
Mm-hmm.
for people. People have different faces. And then back then I lived in you've seen my van. Back then I
Yeah.
lived in my van for 7 years, and at that time I didn't think it was a downgrade. It was actually an upgrade because I
Yeah.
was living in the back of my car and I have to move everything out, move everything in when I leave the camp, right? So when I have a van, I just park. So it
Yeah.
was an upgrade, right?
Yeah.
So basically we just upgrade. Right now we both own a house. So we upgraded again. And then, but just at the different phases. So I think I personally, I keep upgrading.
Same. And I do have moments. So when I go, oftentimes when I'll teach a wolfer course, I don't mind camping out in my truck. And I have these moments where it's just, I go down memory lane and I'm like, I love my truck. And I really
Yeah,
do love my truck. Like I often tell folks, I'm like, my truck and I will be together, and the way we part is one of us will die, or maybe we will both die at the same time together, and so but then I come back home and I'm like, oh, I really love having my own house and just having my place here. And so, and then I think about, I'm like, could I go back to living out of my truck?
you could if you
I
really have
could if
to.
I had to. Exactly. I could if I really had to, but I don't really want to.
Right. And I think that, back like, I mean, it's nice that I have those nose days, but then it's not like I really want to carry a heavy pack.
Oh yeah, I don't miss the
Right.
heavy pack.
But then I
No.
knew that I could if I had to.
Yep, exactly. So
Yeah.
I just went to Death Valley with a friend, and carrying all of our water for 2 days, my pack weighed 29 pounds.
29 is nothing.
It's nothing. And I was like, oh yeah, this is so great. Oh, I don't miss the days of carrying a 70-pound load. And
That's right. And all right. So then tell us more about your guiding days. Yeah. So what kind of guiding? You do backpacking and mountaineering, right?
backpacking, mountaineering, and sea kayaking.
And
And
sea kayaking, of course. You have a water kid.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly. See, got to get the water in there.
and then
Um,
most of them in summer.
Mostly during summer. However, towards the end of my NOLS career, and we'll say end lightly, I was up in Alaska and I visited the NOLS branch.
Still
And
in
of course
Palmer.
yep. And Ashley Wise was like, you want to come work a course? And I'm like, actually, I kind of do. I miss it, but I don't miss it at the same time. And so right. And so,
Yeah,
um,
then elaborate that. I mean, I can't just say I understand because my listeners might not understand.
yeah, field work is really hard. It's especially long expeditions. So the majority of courses I taught
30
for,
days, right?
uh-huh. And I had short courses that were 5 days, 2 weeks long. And maybe I do be willing to do something that's shorter, but it's hard on the body. Um, and you're carrying really heavy loads, especially in the mountaineering program and sea kayaking as well, because the
Oh,
sea kayaking course is fully we carry everything.
hmm.
So
Yes.
we are totally self-sufficient for 30 days. And so those boats and like all that gear, like you're just schlepping things up and down the beach. And with a large group, like it's a lot of work. Whereas on my personal trips, like it's just Corey and I, or a small group, and it just doesn't require as much. And so, but so I don't miss that I don't necessarily miss the. I've had some really good groups, and then I've had some groups where I'm like, oh, I'm just counting down the days, like just really tough. And so, and then those have been valuable as well. Like I've actually come out where it's like a really tough group, but the student outcomes were awesome. It just was really hard work getting them there. Um, and so, and those were rewarding, but a lot, like just a lot of energy where I'd come home after being in the field for 2 to 3 months. And then all I want to do for like 2 to 3 weeks is sit in my hammock out in my front yard. And then my friends are like, you've been here for 2 weeks and you haven't said hi. And I'm like, yeah, I just need to be by myself in my hammock.
Right.
So,
And when you say being in the field for 2 to 3 months, they are not back to back, right?
sometimes they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sometimes I've had courses where they were back to back where I came out while the other course was already briefing and I missed the first day of briefing.
Oh, wow.
It was, yeah, that close, like, and so literally going from one course to the other,
That's like
and having,
30 day and a 30-day back to
uh-huh,
back. Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And
And then
so,
I know the prep day usually is 1 or 2 days, never longer than that, which means that the rest is in the field.
yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're scrambling to maybe get your laundry done.
Right. You basically
And
have no rest at all.
no, not at all. And when I come off courses, I lose in a 30-day course. It's not uncommon for me to lose 10 to 20 pounds in that day. In
Right.
that course. And so then I come off course and I have the metabolism of like a 12-year-old or a teenager, and all I want to do is eat. And I actually do need some time so that I could just literally eat, not really do
Right.
anything to recharge and then go back in the field. And so when I have the back-to-back courses, um, I have definitely burnt out. And yeah, and so it's tough work.
It is. Yeah. Physically demanding and then a
Hmm.
lot of logistics, not a lot of rest time because you
No.
are with students 24/7.
Yep.
And the pack was heavy.
Oh yeah, the packet.
Yes.
Oh.
Sorry, that's my memory of notes. And but
I remember. I
you,
remember.
yeah,
I
yes, go
remember the
ahead.
first time ever putting a 70. I was a Knoll student, and I put on the pack weighed close to 70 pounds, and I fell over backwards.
I know you're not a big person, right? I mean, none of us are. And but then you kept working for that many years. What's
Yeah,
the part that you missed then?
I miss the human connection. I miss the bonds formed with coworkers and students. I even, in some ways, miss the challenging times. What I really liked about working, especially long expeditions, is being able to see transformation of not only individuals but groups as a whole. And so I find that if it's a shorter, like single day, forget about it. If it's a weekend, not so much. Maybe you can get a little bit in a week or 2 week course, but just the stages, for example, of group development, where when you meet people, people get to know each other and there really isn't a whole lot of conflict because we're in the honeymoon stage and people are trying to get along. And then that stage ends and conflict starts to develop. Um, and you need time to be able to work through, develop, and hone in those skills, to work through, um, we'll say like the storming stage, if we're talking about stages of group development. And then people start to really perform. And
Hmm.
that is awesome. And they really start to gel. And even if they still don't necessarily jive with each other, they still find a way to work well together. And so they may, after the course, may not like that be friends, but they still share this unique bond. And I found that people who even like they didn't get along, like at the end of the course and when we come back in town, they don't want to leave each other.
Okay.
Yeah, like they're still
Hmm.
hanging out. Like you would think that they would like
It's not a
bolt
Stockholm
and
syndrome.
no, that they would bolt in other directions, but they don't because they had this experience, and that I miss. I miss being a part
Yeah.
of that.
Hmm. That's the thing about expedition, I
Yeah.
guess, that, right now I think I almost always do day guiding now.
Hmm.
So most of the time it's type 1 fun, and I definitely don't want to go to the type 2 myself.
Yeah.
But then like on expedition it's like different.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And the day guiding, like it depends on the day guiding and short trips. If I have people who genuinely want to learn skills and learn how to be in the outdoors and learn how to um, learn about the land and learn how to use it and appreciate it in a way that respects the land and takes care of the land. I actually really enjoy that's type 1 fun for me. What's not very fun for me is when I get clients that just want you to schlep them around.
Yes.
If I'm being honest, I'm trying, yeah. And
Yeah,
so
I mean, yeah,
no
I
offense to
understand.
those people that I have, and it's not that
Right.
they're bad people. I just don't enjoy the work as much.
It's just like their goal doesn't align with your own personal goal. Obviously, you would
Yes.
help them with their goal as a professional. But
Hmm.
then you definitely, if they align with your own personal goal, you have more fun.
Correct. And so I don't find it as fulfilling.
Yeah. And I certainly, I have like students that, I mean, or clients, they really want to improve, but whichever discipline you want to get better, it's not just a day or
Hmm.
2 days. It's gonna, I mean, even I feel it's like a 30-day intense course is also not gonna cut it.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of time I wish I can have some of them like longer, but
Yes.
then spread out into maybe
Yep.
like a 2-year time frame. And I don't
Agreed.
know how to accomplish that yet. Yeah. But anyway, that was just what I think. I just what's the, and then especially all those people that who have a real job. It's not like they
Hmm.
can just say, "Oh yeah, I'm just gonna take 30 days to this
Exactly.
thing."
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I am actually I'm working on a project, and it's not directly related to outdoor education because I've taken a different turn in education. But now I'm focused on first aid, CPR, wilderness medicine, and EMS education. And so that there's a lot of people, for example, in the Eastern Sierra, that are working jobs full time and volunteer their time to work as or volunteer as local firefighters and whatnot. And I'm trying to figure out just that piece, like how do we? They don't have the time to take intensive courses, and so how do we spread that out and actually create a schedule that they can
Right.
um, access basically this type of education. And so I view that the same in guiding, and I'm wondering, like, can we develop courses maybe in conjunction with community colleges and universities
Mm.
where they can get this training, but that's like spread out over a semester or a year, that would be more conducive um, to working full
Right.
time.
Yeah, and in some way also help the retention, I think.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And isn't it that I know that you back to school right now, kind of? Is
Yeah,
something
I'm
that
a
you are working
student.
on, the project?
I'm a grad student. I am a master's student at Cal State Fullerton in their instructional design and technology program. And so I've been, as an educator, like I've been actually working on different curriculum projects as an instructional designer for several years now, but I decided to go back to school for it. And so my project this is a mouthful, so I'm gonna tell you what my project is, and then I'll explain it. And so, but it's the application of cognitive load theory and experiential learning theory to the instructional design of hybrid stress inoculation training. So talk about a mouthful. Yeah.
All right, hold on. All right, so I heard some keywords. So the cognitive load.
Yes.
Okay. And then even just that kind of inspires some thought. Is that the idea of just like, you don't want to fire hose somebody. You want to manage their cognitive load so they can absorb stuff. Well,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, sorry, your mouthful. I only remember that.
Right.
I'll let you elaborate. Yes.
So, just like you said, cognitive load theory is basically, it's about how the brain works and how you can only handle so much. And so you've got intrinsic factors, basically your knowledge. And then you've got extraneous factors that impact your ability to tap into that knowledge and actually learn new things. So in a nutshell, there's a lot more, like I can totally geek out more and throw out vocabulary words and whatnot, but if people want to geek out,
but you want to have, basically you want to have a model that is more effective.
Exactly. And so, but here's the thing, in my project, so stress inoculation training actually has a twist. Yeah.
Stress what?
Stress inoculation training.
Okay.
So think of a vaccine. A vaccine is to prevent illness, or expose you actually to the illness so that your immune system is more likely to fight against that illness. Okay. So now stress, when a first responder is in it's a stressful situation, it can be hard to perform because the stress itself can shut down basically the brain and make it hard for that first responder to basically access the knowledge and skill that they have. And so with stress inoculation training, we actually intentionally expose students to stressful factors. So that, like in a wilderness first responder course, for example, it actually doesn't take me much to stress students out. All I have to do is just stand there. But I mean, just being the instructor.
Yes, but I understand.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but I can stand there, and I will intentionally change my body language to stand there as if like in this dominant position. So with my legs spread out just slightly and then my arms crossed, and then looking at them with like a full on poker face and no smile. And so
that's right. I was so stressed.
So, but I'm doing that intentionally in order to add a little bit of stress exposure, because they're going to be stressed out in a real incident. And so, and so this project is actually managing cognitive load and incrementally actually increasing cognitive load. And then
it's like a overload.
Yeah.
And super compensate.
And so, and then I'm applying experiential learning theory to this as well.
Experiential learning. Yes.
Yep. And so what I'm doing is I'm creating experiences for the learner. And with those experiences, I'm having them reflect on how they physiologically respond to stress. And so we discuss, I'm like, okay, so what did you feel in your body? What did you feel? How did that impact your ability to tap into the knowledge and skills that you have? So how did it affect your performance? And then we talk about ways to reduce the physiological impacts that stress has. And so we go over exercises. So one of the things that I commonly will mention to students is, and this is going to sound funny, but I'm like, release your butt cheeks. And they're like, what? And I'm like, relax your butt cheeks. And they remember it because like you're like, I don't know what you're talking about right now. But if it's really hard to be tense in the rest of your body while keeping your butt or your glutes tense. And so
Yes.
if you can relax that, you actually kind of inherently relax the rest of your body. And then once your body's relaxed, then start doing some breathing exercises, whether it's box breathing, and box breathing is basically inhaling over 4 seconds, pausing for 4 seconds, exhaling over 4 seconds, and pausing for 4 seconds. And it's just different. It's a way to concentrate on your breathing. But if you were to do breathing exercises while your body is tense, it actually sends the wrong message to your brain. And your brain thinks that you are actually being pinned down. And so it's basically, and it actually, it triggers the fight or flight response in your nervous system. And so it's going through and teaching people how to calm themselves when they're under stress so that they can actually maximize basically tap into their knowledge and skill set and perform at a higher level. And then there's also an element with this of just practicing the skills and that repetition, but you need to practice it under stress. And so, and I could,
yes,
and I can actually, analogous to this would be rock climbing, for example. And you probably do a lot of this where you're not going to just throw your students into the deep end. You're going to gradually build up their skills, but then you're going to expose them to harder problems, and they're going to be stressed out because things are more exposed and whatnot. And so, and then having them reflect on how they performed and so forth. And then we can also focus in on, okay, how are they feeling in their bodies, and how are they responding to the stress, and how can they reduce the physiological effects by doing certain exercises. And in climbing, like I have to breathe. I have to relax. If I get too tense, I'm probably going to fall, or I'm going to crux out, and then I start, like, my leg will start Elvising. And so, or my arms will get really pumped out, or I'll have cramps in my hands and so forth. So it's similar. I would
That's
say, in
very
that respect.
interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting because I think right now in climbing, there's a lot of people, more people. Maybe I should not say a lot. More people start talking about the mental side, or the head, right? Because that definitely affect a lot of things.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think I heard of those. Identify your physiology.
The physiological impact.
Yes,
Yeah.
impact, and then the signs, right? And then so you do those practice, so you know that when those signs happen, what can you do?
Correct.
To help you to regain control to your cognitive ability, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely your cognitive and your physical ability, because it definitely
Yes.
impacts both. So
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Yeah, and then it seems that a lot of things, I mean, human brain, right? Any research about human brain is going to apply to all sorts of disciplines.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so so let's go back a little bit. So you took a turn. So right now, I know the pandemic was kind of quite a factor there, that you reduced the work in the field. However, did you think about that even before the pandemic, and then the pandemic just kind of like push it?
Yeah, I would say, especially so just before the pandemic, I'm trying to remember when, let's see, well, 2017, I injured my ankle in the field and I had to evacuate myself. Talk about a humbling experience. So, um, I was the course lead on a backpacking trip in the winds, and almost probably about 10 days in, I rolled my ankle really bad. And I thought it would be fine. And it's interesting being a woofer instructor, for example, and teaching people what the difference is between a stable and an unstable injury is. And I definitely had an unstable injury, but I'm very stubborn and hard-headed. And I was convinced, I'm like, no, this is stable. And it wasn't. But but I ended up having to evacuate myself. And so that definitely, and I've had injuries over the years for sure. Lifeguarding, I had injuries, and that actually ended my lifeguarding career. A head injury did, and whatnot. And so, and I've been while I've been in education, a lot of the jobs that I do are very physical. And so I had some time to reflect because I was on crutches and wasn't allowed to do anything. However, I would go on hikes on flat land with my crutches. And so, but, and so basically the question is, I asked myself is, how long can I do this? And then there's also a component of, I really enjoy recreating outside and doing personal trips. And so, where is this balance of, I started looking at, like, even, I think it was the year before, no, maybe it was 2018. I can't remember, but where I had basically 3 months in the field and I was so exhausted. I was too tired to even do a personal trip. And so where is that balance between doing things for myself and then also doing things for work and for other people? And the work I do is also for myself, if we're being real. And so, because I find joy in doing fulfilling work. But from a physical standpoint, like, where is that line? And so I started thinking about, okay, well, do I split time? And I kind of had been doing that seasonally, but do I do more education consulting and instructional design work? And so I started kind of, and teaching wellness medicine courses. And that's where I applied to become a WMA instructor, Wellness Medical Associates International. And in 2017, I took their instructor training course and became a WMA instructor. And then a year later, I upgraded to be a lead instructor and definitely was starting to teach a lot more courses. And then the pandemic hit. And so, and about the same time, I also got on with Mono County EMS and started working part-time for our local ambulance service. And so when the pandemic hit, I actually went full force into the EMS land. And I started working for the Emergency Operations Center and was going into homes and doing assessments, in-home assessments. I was doing a bunch of COVID testing. I was supporting people who were in isolation and in quarantine, checking in on them, bringing them food and so forth. And I did that for a few months. And so then became more heavily involved in basically EMS and community healthcare. And that really opened my eyes to how just the disparities between urban or city life and rural life, and the disparities we have in healthcare and access to different services, including EMS and just any healthcare services. And so that's where my life took a turn. And I started moving towards a path So in terms of my career path, it's basically moving towards, right now I'm focused. So I mentioned what I'm doing in grad school, and it's actually one tiny piece of an overall project that I'm currently working on. And I'm working on designing and developing a multi-tiered EMS training program that starts with an EMR woofer combo class, and then followed by a hybrid EMT class, followed by a hybrid advanced EMT class, to basically improve pre-hospital care in the Sierra specifically. So both west side and east side.
And do you, so pandemic was 2020,
Mm-hmm.
and or maybe let's just say 2021 too.
20,
but
yeah, it
and
started March 2020, and I would say for like a good solid 2 years we were going back and forth in and out of restrictions and whatnot.
right. And so it has been a while. Do you still have, since the pandemic, have you done any nose course or any guiding?
No. I did I probably put in maybe a couple days, like a day here and there with Above and Beyond Alaska, when I'm up visiting my in-laws. And so I call it the cameo appearance. I don't even get paid for it. And so, yeah, maybe like I'll split tips, but I basically will be like, okay, you all really like
Right.
need help on this. So other than that, and it's like a day trip here and there, or not even a day, like a full day, it's like a few hours. And so, but yeah, since then I haven't, 2019 was my last NOLS course. And I believe the last time I guided for Sierra Mountain Guides was 2019 as well. I've done some trainings for them since then, but nothing. No, I haven't taken any clients out. It's been mainly guide training.
I see. And I certainly know that it seems that you definitely enjoying what you are doing right now, and you are quite busy too.
Yes.
With your school and with all this work. Do you think you will still pick up some work, say if somehow you say you're done with your school, right? You got your degree, and then they call you, just say, hey, Vijay, we really need a CL on this mountaineering course, and yada yada. Would you consider that, or you just like, oh, I move on?
I might. It depends on how long the field work is. I've got this project is going to take quite a bit of time. I actually am in the process. I'm turning it in later today, but I'm applying for a grant, and hope that I will get how much I'm asking for. I'm asking for quite a bit of money. And in order to basically get this multi-tiered EMS training program off the ground, I have a lot of work ahead of me. And so being out of school, so I should graduate if I do my job in May. And I'm on track to do that. And so once I graduate, then it's going to be full blown into working on this project. That being said, it's a lot of computer time. And so, and I need time away from the computer. And so working a contract here and there could actually be pretty good for me, because it takes me away from the computer. So
I see. But in any rate, though, just by talking with you just now, and then I think your project is pretty exciting.
It is. I'm really excited about it. And it's like applying for these grants. I am, what's the word I'm looking for? I am hopeful, but I there's part of me that doesn't want to get my hopes up because that can be deflating. And for me, I want to have positive energy just continuing to drive me forward. And so, but yeah, it's definitely really exciting. And there's a lot of people who are in support of this
Yeah.
endeavor. And so that, and then I'm excited by the work itself. I get to tap into a creative side of my brain. I do find it a lot of fun to actually create these materials. I'm learning to work with like an animation software, and my thesis prototype has like animated characters, and that's been really fun. And then knowing that this could have a pretty large reach. So the potential impact that it can have, not only on the Sierra, because if we can get something like this really dialed in, then I could see us being role models for other rural places in Alaska and across the country. And so that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, I am excited for you too. And I think this is definitely a good project. It's worth not working the nose course for.
Yeah, I
And
think so too.
yeah, because for me, I look at you from my understanding is that you definitely work hard. And you want to play, even though it's say out in the wild or on your job, right? And then so these things kind of fits you, right? You can work hard, you can also play because there's a lot of creativity
Yes.
involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a good fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can keep doing this, and then go outside for personal time.
Yeah. And personal touch is going to be so
Yeah.
much sweeter than that. You have no responsibility by your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm totally excited for you. For me, it's looking that it seems like, okay, after college, you found education, working
Yes.
education, right? And
Yep.
it seems like that's kind of keep you going. It seems like your passion is actually in that,
Education. Yeah.
right? So outdoor education just somehow fit in that life phase
It did.
in that. Yes.
It's
Yeah.
all been education related. So
Mm-hmm.
basically my paths um, have been, with the exception of basically EMS, like lifeguarding, but even in lifeguarding, I was a junior lifeguard instructor for many years as well. And so there's an education component, and it's basically the things I'm passionate about. And so I'm passionate about helping people. It's helping people. I guess that would be the overall umbrella. And under that, the way I feel like I can make an impact is through education and EMS. And so that's where lifeguarding came in. And once I figured out that education, because I didn't really know, I just jumped in. Like
Right.
they hired me, right? And they threw me into the deep end. It was very deep. So, but that was another avenue. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And then now I feel like I've merged those two fields, and and I still work on the ambulance, and so I go out on calls and I help people that way. But education has really been the driving force, and the basically the the way I can reach a greater amount of people. So um it's been fun, and it's just been interesting. This path, like it just winds and weaves, and the way I guess I've approached life is I've gone down a path, and I see, let's say, a door, and when I imagine doors, I'm going to be honest with you, in my mind it's like a cartoon, and I imagine like a door in a tree, or a door in a big boulder, or this portal that opened up in the ocean. It sounds weird, but I love the outdoors. And then the door will creak open, and I'm like, ooh, what's behind that one? And sometimes I open it and I'm like, yeah, that's not for me. Or sometimes I open it and I'm like, ooh, I'm really curious. And I walk through, and then it leads to other doors opening. And I feel like been my life in a nutshell.
Nice. Yeah. You got thrown into deep end and you survive, and then you're willing to open a door to check it out.
Yeah.
If you see one. I mean,
Yeah.
you might decide eventually you don't like this door, but then
Right.
you check it out as an experiment.
Yeah. And it's all been interrelated. I started teaching in the classroom, and that actually led me to Wellness Medical Associates, even before I got on with Knowles. And so I met my husband in a WMA course.
Oh.
And he mentioned Knowles. He said, so when we met, he was actually getting ready to go take his instructor Knowles course. And I was like, oh, I've never heard of Knowles before. And that same year, I took a outdoor educator course out of the PNW branch, a mountaineering outdoor educator course. And then that inspired me to take the Knowles instructor training course where we met. And then it just continues to unfold. And then, and no offense to Knowles, but I loved WMA's approach to medicine. And so just through those twists and turns and those avenues, like it brought me back to WMA, and I became a WMA instructor. And so all of these, it's just interesting how you look at how the journey of life occurs, and it's not a straight line. It's not a straight trajectory.
Right. It's not just like, I have this plan that when I was 5, I want to be the president of the United States, and then somehow I just steadily move along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe
I like it.
Yeah. So that's, I guess, me in a nutshell.
Yeah,
my journey.
I totally enjoy the stories, right? Yeah. And definitely, yeah. Actually, I'm not gonna make any my conclusion. I'll let listeners to.
I'm not gonna make any conclusions either, because
I mean, your life is still going on, so
exactly
right. But I just it's maybe I'll ask you big questions. Like you mentioned that there's some burnout and maybe there's some depressing moments. And what eventually helped you to go through those days?
Therapy has been a big component. Therapy has really helped. And I was pretty resistant to it for a while. I would say that the pivotal moment that changed my mind was, so in 2010, I had a work-related accident. I was lifeguarding the Los Angeles Triathlon, and I was in short. So there's different jobs when you're working an event like that, and so there's people out on paddle boards, and then there's people who actually sit in the surf line. And so I was one of those people sitting in the surf line, and a competitor apparently landed on my head, and it was a really big surf day. I didn't drown. The body does some amazing things. They said I kind of popped to the surface and continued to try to work, although I'm pretty sure I was kind of useless. But that head injury wound up being life-changing. I wound up, I don't like to use the word suffering, but for lack of a better word, I guess being inflicted with post-concussive syndrome. And it really was debilitating. And it was so debilitating that I actually wound up becoming very depressed, and at one point suicidal. And so I was hospitalized. It's not something that I talk about often, and I suppose I'm being very vulnerable right now, knowing that I'm on a podcast. And so, and when I got basically when I hit rock bottom, I realized that I needed to do more to help myself. And so, and what I had been doing, the mistake that I made was I had this debilitating injury. And then I just kept trying to go back to normal. And I even went back to the beach, and I was terrified. I couldn't focus. It was really hard for me to concentrate on the water. I was really sensitive to light. I was really sensitive to noise, and I was having these really debilitating migraines. And I was petrified that someone would drown in my water. And in part that also, and so everything about that just ate away at my self-confidence. And in part led to that burnout as well. And every time I try to do something, I basically would get knocked down on my face because I wasn't able to do the things that I normally did. And so, and it really impacted my mental health. And so it started in the hospital, I obviously saw therapists and whatnot. And then when I got out of the hospital, I was in therapy 2 to 3 days a week. In addition to other therapies like acupuncture, I went in more of an alternative medicine route. And it was really helpful. I didn't work for 8 months straight. I wasn't allowed to. I was on disability for 8 months. And it was during that time where all my practitioners, so the psychologist I was working with, I wound up being placed on medication as well. So I was working with a psychiatrist, UCLA Center for East-West Medicine. I had doctors there. And then I was also working with a Rolfer and a cranial sacral therapist. And so all of that combined, and then I got into Qigong. And so at a martial arts school. And so all of that combined made me realize that I needed to do more for myself. And I had to be kind to myself is really the big lesson that I learned. And so now I'm trying to, I still continue therapy. I see a therapist every 2 weeks. I think it's really important. So, and it's been really helpful if I working on the ambulance, if I have a really bad call, if I don't have an appointment scheduled within a few days, I can schedule one to help me process through that. And then just help me process and then prevent. I work a lot on burnout prevention because I have this tendency to work hard and overtax myself and take on too much, to the detriment of my personal self-care. And so, therapy, trying to do things for myself, but I have to frame it in such a way where doing things for myself helps other people. And that's where my motivation comes from. It's been interesting from a psychological standpoint.
I mean, I can understand though, because you are the one who feel that I feel that you put other people's need in front of yourself.
Yes.
And then, which ironically, that you might overwork yourself and then you cannot take care of other people's needs. So right now it's great that you recognize this and then do something about it. I really love that you say that be kind to yourself. And thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Oh, thank you for creating a space where I
and I think that's
vulnerable.
Important though, because if you are very passionate about, like as a guy or as a teacher, we are very invested in other people's success, right? And then, then we also need to take good care of ourselves because then we can help other people.
Yeah, and so my therapist often reminds me, and she has to remind me often, hey, Brigitte, it's like being on an airplane when they tell you if the oxygen mask comes down, you need to place it on yourself first. And I struggle with that even till, it's a work in progress.
I think a lot of people probably struggle with that. Then that's why they remind people about that. Yeah.
So,
cool.
So.
Wow. Geez, I thought I know you for so many years, but I learned something new today. Actually, a lot of new things. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing all this experience. Just let me poke you.
Yeah, no, it's that one is definitely a hard topic to talk about, but
I think it's important though.
It's important, yeah. And so I try. Some days are better than others in terms of, and it helps. We've known each other since 2008, and I view you as a good friend. And while I don't share a lot about myself, even with good friends, it's hard for me. And so that's also something that I'm practicing is
Right.
that vulnerability, and thank you for creating that
Yeah.
space. So I don't always just say, hey, guess what happened to me? So, or it's not necessarily what happened. It's guess look at this experience I had. And I don't necessarily share the rough points, the
Yeah.
lows of life. So
Yeah. One thing I learned about just doing this podcast though is I'm also like you, I mean, I don't like to talk about myself.
yeah.
And then the reason is because I just I don't know. It's not worth mentioning.
Yep.
And but then I interviewed so many people, and I'm just genuine, just love to hear all the stories, and it helped me in many different ways. So maybe I should also start sharing more about myself. Yeah.
It helps to have a person that actually like prompts you and like
Yes.
digs a little bit, to be honest, because I'm not gonna.
Right.
I've been that. I remember my first course for NOLS, for example. I remember the program supervisor telling me, "Hey, Brigitte, you need to talk more. You need to talk about yourself because you're about to teach Naval Academy students, and you need to promote yourself and brag a bit." And I'm like, "Yeah, no,
Because it's Naval Academy, is that why?
yeah." Like, and that they were like, "Yeah, these guys are gonna, they're gonna look at you." And I was as a female or whatever, and I've experienced that in male dominated cultures, but talking about myself and the things that I've done is not necessarily a strong suit. I'd rather just kind of
show them in action.
Yes. And so it was funny, and even at the end of that course they're like, yeah, you need to talk about yourself more. And I'm like, no, I just would rather just run them into the ground a little bit. Start.
Maybe they will prefer that you just talk about yourself.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's just it just goes back to like, I don't like,
right.
I don't, and I actually can feel myself blushing right now in some ways. And so, and I know I've done a lot, but talking about it is, or like talking about it without getting asked questions, like just talking about it to talk about it is really hard for me.
Yeah, I think there will be a balance on that. Maybe that will be another topic, because I found that I work with other guys, and some guys, they just nonstop talking about themselves. And then, and to be honest, I didn't think they were bragging, but then they just don't know what to say, so they just keep talking about themselves. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
And
yeah.
So I feel that building connection with, say, clients, students, sometimes they do want to learn about you, but then
they do.
Right, they do. So how you're gonna do this is kind of interesting. So because I think you and I tend to say little.
Yes, and I don't know what to say. Like, where do you start?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm 48 years old now. Like, and I'm like, where do I start? Like, what do you want to know? Do you want to know what kind of music I listen to? Like, do you want to know what my favorite movies are? Like growing, or
right. Actually, like, I don't even know those things about you. See, I didn't ask those things.
It's like, right. I don't know what people want to know about me.
Right. So, yeah. I mean, but I'll have to think about that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, ice breaking is always hard for me.
Yeah.
I enjoy talking with people, but sometimes we just met, and what should I do? And all that. Yeah, definitely. Cool.
And I enjoy deep conversations. I prefer those over small talk. But I don't necessarily with a new person know how to, I don't just jump in there.
jump to the deep end. That's why you
No,
jump to the
you gotta.
deep end.
I'm not gonna jump it. You gotta throw me in the deep end.
Okay. Oh, you need to be thrown into the deep end. I see. Yeah.
Or maybe actually encourage. Throwing me in the deep end, I might actually bottle up. So
Oh.
you did a really good job in this podcast at actually starting in the shallow end and encouraging me to get to the deep end.
Awesome. Yeah. Now we are also learning a little bit about how to talk with our clients' potential.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
for sure. For sure.
Great. Wow. It's a lovely and nice, very fun conversation with you, Brigitte. I'm not gonna keep you for too long here.
Okay.
So yeah. So I'm just I think I'm not gonna end here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was good to see you and talk to you, and don't be a stranger.